you for coming to the 9th Literary Festival. This is my partner in crime, Jen Antwistle. And so we have to just thank a few people, as you would imagine. And I have them right here, somewhere. The founding sponsors. That's good. All right, the Institution for Savings and the Newburyport 5-cent Savings Bank have been hugely instrumental. The Mass Cultural Council, the local cultural councils from Amesbury, Georgetown, Merrimack, Newbury, Newburyport, and West Newbury. And then there was one other, oh, I wanted to thank the press. Because have you seen the press that we got this year? The Daily News, and of course, Dyke Hendrickson, The Current, and who Bruce Menon wrote that story, and Stuart Lytle wrote a story for the Town Common. Then we had the Globe, James Sullivan, and somebody else, and another person, and then WMBP, we were on 3 times. I think I'm going to go into radio because I'm really good at it. So anyway, that's on my list.
All right, well, I will take a moment to thank all of the volunteers because there are a lot of people that will be in all of the venues tomorrow working behind the scenes. And we definitely could not do this without them. So if any of you are in the audience, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
We'll see you tomorrow. I also want to thank the steering committee, and I am going to name names here. So, because it's a very
they're a good group.
Yeah, these are the people that work all year to make this happen. So we have Michael Cameron, Linda Carpino, Cindy Dad, Rena Espaillat, Elida Fry, Jessica Hilbin, Nana Kennedy, Karen Kruger, Sherry Frank, Shannon Schnagel, Debbie Zabo, and Sky Wentworth. Thank you. And now I think I have the honor to introduce Ann Hood. Anne has been a friend of Andre's and a friend of the festival for many years. She's the author of such bestsellers as The Knitting Circle, The Red Thread, and Comfort, A Journey Through Grief, which was a New York Times Editor's Choice and named one of the top 10 nonfiction books of 2008 by Entertainment Weekly. She's received a Best American Spiritual Writing Award, a Best American Food Writing Award, a Best American Travel Writing Award, and the Paul Bowles Prize for Short Fiction. And her most recent novel is The Obituary Writer. She was born in West Warwick, Rhode Island, but she lives in Providence now with her husband. Please welcome Ann Hood. She'll be out in a second.
Now, I have a less formal introduction. We call Andre our FBFF, Festival Best Friend for. Yeah. And so, of course, we who are townies, get it? Call him Andre. But in other circles, he's Andre Dubus III. And he has been with us each year for the last 9 years. He has read, he's hosted, he's been in conversation with people. He has narrated Fontaine's, what was the name of it, about the pigs? The pig
Ahoy, I think? Yeah, Pigs Ahoy.
Pigs Ahoy, yeah. I mean, everything. And Fontaine has done 2 dance numbers for us, by the way, choreographed those. But anyway, he has been with us. In the first year of the festival, we honored Andre's father, Andre Dubus. And now it is a great thrill to honor, to honor Andre. And I'm gonna shut up now because I think I've said just about enough. So he's a generous and wonderful person, and we all love him. Come on, baby.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is so fun. Thank you for asking me to come and talk to you.
Oh, Anne. My pleasure. Is that too loud? Is that making a weird sound?
Yeah, stop moving.
Perfect. Okay, can you hear me? Is mine fixed? Yeah. Okay, okay, good. So, Andre, let's have a conversation.
Let's talk, Anne. Can I just say, I am so, that's too loud, huh? Is it too loud? I'm just so pleased and proud that Anne came and is doing this, and she's one of my favorite American writers, and I would just like to give her another round of applause.
To tell you that last night I went to a similar setup that our friend Laura Lippman did with Gillian Flynn, who wrote Gone Girl. Wow. And after I left there, I had kind of a nervous breakdown because Laura was like the best person, you know, speaker, and she was quoting, saying pithy things, and I was like, oh my goodness, I have my notebook and this.
And it's a meat composition notebook when we were in middle school.
Yeah, we did. And then I had a nervous breakdown, but now I'm not, because now I'm here and it's fine. I'm so excited to talk to you, and I was just whispering to him back there that I just read Dirty Love. I was a little slow, but isn't it awesome? I mean,
Yeah.
But I guess I could start there because as a writer, I wonder what inspires a writer to write novella in that form.
Well, the honest answer is I don't know. No, the honest answer is I wasn't trying to write novellas at all. In fact, two of those, so you guys, Dirty Love is 4 novellas that are loosely linked, and 2 of them were the ashes that rose, were the phoenixes that rose from the ashes of what failed, as the same novel I tried to write over 10 separate, probably over 20 years, 2 separate times.
Wow.
And the first attempt was 2.5 years, and I found myself writing this kind of novel where I'd be skipping the pages as I was reading it over, and I remember Elmore Leonard's line who said, you know, try to leave out the parts the reader skips. And there was just one little nugget in there that felt real to me, and that was this woman in her mid-20s who still hadn't found love and was working in a bank and didn't think she'd ever find love. And I didn't even want to write about her, but she felt more alive. And you and I have talked about this. I do think in this fiction writing descent into the dream world, there's this strange difference between making something up on the one hand and imagining it on the other. You know, you can write a perfectly fine chapter, but that doesn't mean it happened. And I think actually the more you write, you've been doing it daily for decades, you know, you get a little more nimble, but just because you can write a scene a little more nimbly doesn't mean it rings true. So that's how those novellas came. Anyway.
Yeah, because you guys know it's a strange form. You know, it's longer than a short story, but not quite a novel. But I have to say that when I read them, I actually felt like I'd read a novel. They had the heft, I felt, that a novel has. So bravo, hats off to you, my friend.
Thank you.
One of the things that I read that I wanted to talk to you about, because this struck me as I was reading Dirty Love in particular, but I had thought it before reading your fiction, is the unbelievably deft way you use memory. And I saw in the Boston Globe, as I was sleuthing and snooping on you, that the Boston Globe reviewer had quoted a Charlie Baxter essay called Lush Life. And in it he said, we are in the here and now, but at the same time we're in the back then, in real life. So why don't we do that in prose too? And Andre does that. But I have found when I teach writing that the clunkiest thing beginning writers do is try to incorporate memory and flashback. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if you can talk, how do you do that consciously? You do it so well, but how do you manage that and organize that?
Well, the honest answer again is, I don't know.
What an easy subject.
Yeah. Next question. No, and I do know, and I've heard a lot of, you know, helpful talk in conferences and in workshops and other places where you hear a lot of teaching saying, look, don't start your story or novel and then go back right away. Just keep having things happen and move forward. But for me, the movement forward is only grounded in what has come before. You know, I mean, sitting here now, I mean, I began the day giving a eulogy to a friend. And I'm still wearing the clothes I wore without the tie. So I'm bringing that to this moment. You know, these boots were the first things I bought online, and I'm a computer digital world hating man. I'm a dinosaur who's never texted, will never have a screen I stare at in my hand. But I was kind of happy to get these from the internet so easily.
And we're happy you did.
And they're frankly Lucchese boots, and they're cheaper online than at some Stoa in New York. And so, I mean, I think we have to be careful with rules anytime in any fine art instruction and creative writing. And I find that I don't believe in the past. I don't believe the past exists. I actually think it's all here right now with us at all times. And we know tomorrow doesn't exist, but I sure as hell know the past does.
It's interesting, and I don't want to, you know, beat it to death, but I am really interested in how you do it. Do you ever stop yourself and say, oh, I dropped the present story, or do you just go with what you feel that balances?
I'd be curious to know how you do it, but after I answer, I want to hear your answer,
Okay.
because I think this whole thing is a descent into the dream world. The writer Richard Bausch said, look, if you think that you're thinking when you're writing, think again. He said you're much closer to the dreaming side of your mind, so dream it through. So, you know, one of the beautiful challenges of having a publishing career and a book contract and a deadline and advances, that's all a good problem to have, but it's not good for writing a book. It's not good for it at all, because you know, especially if your family's financial health is dependent upon you getting it done. And so I try to forget that I'm writing a book and that my family's financial health depends upon it. Because I still have a truck and carpentry tools, and we can still do things, we can still survive. Because what I'm getting at is, there is every logical incentive in my life to not let the character roam and dream and go back. But I have found that the entire novel can exist if I let it go back. In other words, I always let it go where it wants, knowing I can always revise and revise and revise again. So, but many times I will have written for 6, 9, 10 weeks, you know, 3 paragraphs. That's a joke. 80 pages, and then shave it down to 4 paragraphs. Later if I have to. So, but I allow myself to roam. And I've never, whenever I haven't allowed myself to roam, it's as if I've strangled the life out of this thing that's trying to breathe. So how do you do it?
You know, I really lately have been questioning a lot of the things that writing teachers, and I put myself and you in that category, say to students, because it sort of blocks some things that are just instinctual. And we do give these rules that all good fiction breaks, all good writing breaks.
Right.
And so I try not to think about how I do what I do.
Right.
Because I think if you think about it too much, you become self-conscious and you don't do it as well.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? It's why I don't use how-to writing books. There's some really great ones out there. But the problem is that I haven't met anyone, especially adults, at conferences who have lives and ambitions and dreams about writing, who have accomplished lives outside of writing. They're very good students. And what I try to say at least once a day in these conferences is, don't be too good a student.
Yeah, right.
Don't listen to everything I say. What do I know? Take the 1 or 2 kernels that resonate in your gut and then keep them and then move on. But
yeah, there's no easy way. It's not really a manual.
no. So maybe they're not rules, maybe they're guidelines, and use them if they help and don't if they don't.
I like what Jenny Egan, who wrote The Goon Squad, I can't think of the beginning, Visit from the Goon Squad?
A Visit from the Goon Squad.
That doesn't sound right. Okay, Visit from the Goon Squad. She said one of her best strengths as a writer is that she's a good problem solver. And I liked that idea because really when you teach writing and when you revise your own work, you're reading it to see, does it work? You know, and you're trying to find out what's making it clunky, and that's a problem solving.
Well, back to that Bausch quote. So he said, do not think dream, do not think dream. But then he went on to say, but then try to be terribly smart about this thing you've dreamed, and look at it the way a doctor looks at an X-ray. And that's where you kind of go to the, well, you know, I was about to say you go to the more analytical side of your mind. I still think you go to the dreaming side, the reading side of your mind, which is still a dreamer. But you have to be merciless about what this is that's come out of you.
Yeah.
And you must murder, as Faulkner said, any darling that doesn't serve the whole. And that's another problem with having a book deadline, because you might cut your novel down to a haiku or a very nice poem.
Andre, I don't know if you knew that.
Not a lot of heft, but a lot of heart.
Only a few syllables. I don't know if you knew this, but on the internet, you are attributed to saying, kill your darlings.
Oh, really? No, I think I said just beat the crap out of that.
No, it said,
are you
kill your
serious?
darlings. Andre Dubus III. I was like, gee, I thought it was Faulkner. I mean, I know, that was kind of funny,
I
right?
think it was a much better write-up than that kid from Haverhill.
So something that when people say this to me kind of bothers me, and I just want to get your reaction to it, is when they say a writer is either character-driven or plot-driven. They separate it out like that, and they almost can be accusatory, like your books are character-driven, or her books are plot-driven, and you don't know, you know, it sounds like you've done something terribly wrong. Do you separate those things out at all, or do you let your characters take you places? How do you see those?
Well, I mean, you know, if anybody were to put me in a camp, I hope they put me in the character-driven camp. But I'd be making more money if I was in the plot-driven camp. But I mean, let's define plot, and I will quote a wonderful writer named Janet Burroway. You know, we throw that word around, but I think this is what it means. Burroway says that story is a causal sequence of events with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And she goes on to say, but then plot is how we arrange that causal sequence of events. And of course, the motivations for how you arrange it has to do with that, looking at the X-ray and cooperating with what you've made and try to make it as true to itself as you can, I think, apart from the marketplace and a book deadline, etc. So in that sense, I think every writer who writes a story has got to be as plot-driven as character-driven, because it's really the shape. It's the ultimate shape. It's the ultimate experience the story's going to have of these characters' journeys. But it's, for me, no fun at all if the characters aren't flesh and blood and alive, and as they are in your work, and Wally Lamb's who's here this week, and in Richard Rousseau. I mean, those are my favorite kind of novels, and those are the kind I try to write.
You know, I wrote, I think, 5 books before I thought, gee, I should have a plot. I don't have a plot in my novels. And then I started more consciously thinking about that.
Did you really wonder about that? Did you really?
I really one day said, gee, I should start putting plots in my novels. I think I wrote very, very situationally, like characters in a situation.
Kind of like life. I like that.
Exactly. But I do think about it a little more now. I do say something has to happen here.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Well, and that is one of the dangers of letting the past just rule the present. I mean, is she going to eat that sandwich or just keep remembering 7th grade? That bread's getting stale, and he might need to pee eventually, too. And doesn't he have a job?
Yeah.
These things are important.
Exactly. Actually, jobs is one thing I want to talk to you about. I'll do that next. But for one of my novels, I had handed it in, and my wonderful editor called me in and said, what's this book about? And I was like, you just
You're asking me?
You just read it. And I said, well, you know, and I started explaining and explaining. She said, no, I know all that. But what's the book about? And I was like, is this a trick question? And then I said, I don't know how else to explain it. She goes, I know. Go back and look at this again. Because nothing happened.
Oh. I thought she was asking thematic questions.
No,
Is this
no.
about democracy,
all I had was
capitalism?
theme and angst and character, beautiful character.
It's about a woman who feels a lot of shit.
Yeah, that's what I do. That's really good. Okay, I heard an incredible lecture a few years ago by Ben Percy. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He wrote some werewolf book or something recently. But it was called Get a Job. And it was about how often beginning or new writers forget to give jobs
Yeah, it's huge.
to their characters. And how once a character has a job, it changes everything. Like a farmer is really different than a librarian, and they, you know, an astronaut sees things a little bit different than a rock star, etc. This leads me to a couple things. One being, you have had some interesting jobs, and I'm wondering how that helped you as a writer, or continues to help you as a writer.
Okay, but remind me to ask Ann Hood about the year she was a flight attendant.
I make a good gin and tonic.
I was at a conference in Ohio years ago, and this very famous fantasy writer was giving a talk, and I was listening in, and someone asked him about jobs. He said, "Oh, I give the characters jobs at the end of the book. I figure that out." I said, "Are you
What?
Excuse me, brother. Let me tell you something. When I was a self-employed carpenter working construction 10 hours a day, I would come home a different man than I would when I was teaching college writing. I would come home after a day of using the engineering side of my brain, which isn't very strong in the first place, and using my body all day, and I just wanted to grunt and drink. Just what, beer, TV. That's it.
Yeah.
And then I come home from teaching, I'd be talking too much. Oh, you know what I'm thinking about. And then when I was a bartender, for years I was a bartender, I was kind of cynical. I would look at people as just these need machines, because after I like that, need machines.
You stop wording that.
Well, no, I was a head bartender at 10 Center Street in town here 20 years ago, and I remember perfectly nice people would come in on a Friday or Saturday night, but I've been working for so many years serving people their steak au poivre with the béarnaise sauce and their freaking Tanqueray martini. I work all week too. Where's my Friday night? And they come in smiling, and I think, I think I'm gonna poison your steak. And I'm gonna and so, our jobs are everything. They totally affect how we are. And one of the stories in Dirty Love is this what's his name?
Mark Welch.
Yes.
Mark Welch.
Mark Welch, who, by the way, I don't know if Mark Welch is in this audience, but he was the former president of the Institution for Savings. I have to tell you how this came about.
Oh, this is fun.
So we were doing a fundraiser for my wonderful sister, Suzanne Dubus, and her Ginny Geiger Crisis Center. I'd like to give her a round of applause. She's got
I can't see faces.
And she's my sister is a national leader in domestic violence prevention. Twice I have called her on the cell phone. We're talking, she says, "Honey, hold on, I have a call." And I'm driving. She says, "Honey, it's Joe Biden, I'll call you back." I think Sue Dubus has come a long way from Haverhill, Mass. So my point is, I'm talking about what? Oh, anyway, real quick. So it was a fundraiser, and so I'm sure you've done this. Yeah. You auction off a name. Somebody.
They pay to have their name.
So Mark Welch was the former president of the bank, and he's the poor bastard in that first story whose wife is cheating on him.
I'm impressed on so many levels, but the first one I have to say is, when I do that, I never make them the main character. I use the name as like the neighbor or something.
Well, and he wrote a big check.
Well, I just cheat. I don't know, I just cheat. Yeah, the story he's talking about, I had to write it down because I was afraid I was going to mess it up. I love the title. Listen carefully as our options have changed. This guy's job, Andre, it blew me away how you described what he did. There were 2 pages where I was like, okay, what did Andre do? Go work at this company? It was so specific. What did you do? Did you work at that company?
Yes, I was a corporate executive for 5 years just to write that story.
The terminology was so crazy.
No, but I want to ask you about this in this whole notion of research. So Richard Price, the wonderful novelist, had this great line. He said, my first few books, I wrote just all about my experience. He took that Sarah Orne Jewett line very literally, write what you know. So he wrote about growing up in the Bronx, and he wrote about the gangs, and he wrote about New York. He said, but then I felt like I was writing from inside a telephone booth. And he started Richard Price did, cruise in the back of police cars with New York City policemen and listen to stories. And that opened up this entire imaginable world. And so you don't have to be writing fiction long before you find yourself writing yourself into a corner of human experience about which you're totally ignorant. Like, what does a brain surgeon do anyway? And so I found the character of Mark Welch. I didn't want to make him a banker for obvious reasons.
That was a good thought. That was a good.
But I had again, back to this whole notion of what we do being very significant in our personal lives. A dear friend of mine was a project manager for years in corporate America. And I noticed that when he came home, you know, the big job of a project manager is to manage people. And there's a lot of pressure. There might be some of you in this room. And he would come home and manage his wife and kids. Not in a good way. And I began, in the same way we bring our work home.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm going to interview him. And so I actually sat him down and bought him lunch and took notes for 3 hours. And then a year later, I just kind of drew from what I learned when I needed it.
It was terrific. Yeah, I really inhabit it because it's so shaped the guy.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
If you have not read Ann Hood's, well, she's got a brand new novel. When's
September.
She's got a new novel coming out in September called The Italian Wife. Covers 100 years in the life of an Italian woman, yes?
Yay.
A round of applause on that one. But Ann's most recent novel is a beautiful, melancholy, frankly, I just think poem of loss and hope called The Obituary Writer. And it goes way back to the earthquake of the turn of the century in San Francisco. So what about you in research? How did you do it? How do you incorporate it in your work?
Well, I was the kid who loved doing research papers, and I still do because you get to use Roman numerals.
I do that when I sign my name. I hate that 3 on my name, by the way. Sorry, go ahead.
When you do get to use Roman numerals, that's great. And I like all the stuff around it, like index cards and organizing facts and stuff. So I research even books that aren't historical or that I don't need. Like you said about this guy's job. I will sit and write in my notebooks, and then I think I use about 5% of it.
Which is good, because the danger is you'll use way too much.
Yeah, and I never open them, unless I have to check a date or something. Once I've written them down and done all the research, I kind of put it aside.
So you trust what you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always say, it's funny you do here, because I say my brain is like that thing in your dryer that collects lint. And I just like what lands up there. You know, I don't know.
But you know, I point here because I actually feel, I feel as if when I'm writing well, when I'm dreaming more than thinking, I really feel like I'm kind of writing from here.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a visceral thing. Yeah. I have this quote. Oh, I'm the one doing that. I just think, what is he doing that makes that? And it's me when my watch hits it. There are 2 quotes that I read, and again, I know you said the little darling thing, so I'm not sure how accurate these are. But I really, this is from Townie, like one of my all-time favorite books, isn't it, guys? It's like... I just started to cry because I love so much about it. And I'm going to do this, right? I love so much about it, and I get teary remembering when I first met Andre at Ragdale, and you had just started writing it. And some of the conversations we had, and the things that you think about when you're writing about your life, because then you're writing about other people's lives too, and this beautiful book that came from that. But this is one of my favorite parts of it, so I just want to read it. And I felt, I'm going to cry because I love this so much, and I felt more like me than I ever had, as if the years I'd lived so far had formed layers of skin and muscle over myself that others saw as me, when the real one had been underneath all along. And I knew writing, even writing badly, had peeled away those layers, and I knew then that if I wanted to stay awake and alive, if I wanted to stay me, I would have to keep writing. I'm sorry, pardon me, but I think many of you here, even if it's not writing, there is that thing. The world saw you as this, and one day, if you're blessed, the real you emerges. You know, you peel those layers away. I love, if I wanted to stay awake and alive, like, I don't want to sleepwalk through this life anymore. Yeah. You know, I don't want to be robotic and programmed. I want to be alive and awake. What was the moment? Can you tell us Can you describe it, or?
Yeah, but you know, Anne has written one of the most powerful books I've ever read, and it's also a memoir, and it's called Comfort. And if you haven't read it, it's about the loss of her daughter, Grace. And it's, I just can't have you praise that book without mentioning how the highest esteem I hold Comfort in, because it is so brave. And where she goes in this book is just so phenomenally courageous. And frankly, I don't know if I would have been able to write Townie if I had read that first.
Oh, wow, that's...
And we sort of, it's a beautiful thing, this life, right? We all have to leave it. We all have to leave this earth. And it's a terrible thing, but it's not, but it is, but it's not, but it is. And it's quite beautiful when we help each other in ways we don't even know. So I had to say that out loud.
That's really amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's true. True. So, the moment for me was, and I'll compress it, but if you haven't read Townie, you don't have to have read it, but I was a new kid a lot. My mom and dad divorced when I was about 10. My mother, my courageous single mother, who frankly raised the four of us totally alone in first world poverty, and is one of my heroes, and is sitting here tonight.
What?
I must applaud my mother. Yeah, my mom, right there.
Great son, as you know.
And she's sitting next to another great son, my brother, Jeff.
Oh my gosh, this is, wow.
The whole family's here. Matter of fact, we're a little strangers. There's my cousin, there's my uncle, there's my aunt. Shit, honey, you're in my town. You're the only stranger in this room.
A stranger comes to town.
So you're asking about what is the moment when, okay, real quick, I was a bullied kid. I got beat up until I snapped at age 14, 15. I began to box. I began to fight all the time. I was a small, terrified boy, and I hated violence. I still do, but I could no longer be a victim ever again from anyone. And actually, my self-esteem had plummeted so low, I actually did not care if I was physically murdered. It would be better to be shot, stabbed, beaten to death than to look in the mirror at 15 and see a coward. I wasn't going to do it anymore. I began to box. Much to my surprise, I had athletic ability. To my greater surprise, I had boxing ability. And I go to a bar, I wait for some guy to hit his wife, and put him in the hospital. I go to a house party, wait for some big guy to lord over someone smaller, and I try to put him in the hospital. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a big, tough guy. I'm actually a small, angry, crazy guy is what I was. Which is why I won far more fights than I should have. I once fought a guy who weighed close to 300 pounds, and I beat him unconscious. I weighed 158 pounds. I'm not bragging. Although, to be totally honest, the little boy who's still in here still is glad I changed myself from a victim to a perpetrator, but I was a perpetrator. And I knew that I was putting more violence in the world, and even though I got a lot of social rewards, and the behavioral police loved me because I was wailing on guys they wanted to but couldn't without losing their badges, that little voice that we all have, intuition, by the way, I don't know the Greek or Latin root, but you know what intuition actually means? It means to guard. And that little voice inside me knew that every time I was in a fight, even if I'd just beaten up someone who was hitting his wife in the face with his fists, which happened far more than I care to remember, I knew I was putting more violence and ugliness in the world, and I knew I was going to get killed pretty soon, or go to prison, or both, which happened to a lot of my friends growing up. Over 60 of my classmates are dead. And so I began to box as a way to control my street violence. I said, well, I'll be a boxer. And I was living in Lynn, and I was living in this tiny little apartment. I was working with my brother, Jeb. We were working construction. And every night I was going to the Lynn Boys Club down at the, in Lynn, and working with a guy named Tony Pavoni, who was a storied trainer. He was like the featherweight champion of New England in 1917 or something. He was great. He had literally cauliflower ears. Yeah, a voice like this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, anyway. One night, and to this day, I have a hard time believing in a God, but I have no problem believing in the divine. I really do. I think it's among us and around us at all times, and something really invisible and beautiful is happening, always. And something made me sit down at my little table, my tiny little kitchen in Lynn, and instead of running down to the club to train after a day of construction in the winter, I was training for the Golden Gloves down in Lowell, which sounds pretty impressive. I just signed up. But it sounds good. Yeah, I trained for the gloves down the wall. It's true, I did, me and Mickey Ward, except he fought. I didn't even get in the car and drive down.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, it sounds good. So, I'll compress. Something, Anne, that I have to just call divine made me sit down with a cup of tea. I was still in my sweats. Get a piece of, it was a composition notebook and a pencil, and I began to write a scene from the point of view of a woman losing her virginity on the hood of a Pontiac in the misty rain in the Maine woods. Wicked comfortable, girls. And it was overwritten and kind of terrible, but I didn't care. When I finished writing, that tea, which had been boiling hot, was now lukewarm. I thought I'd been sitting there maybe 15 minutes. It must have been over an hour. I saw all these words crossed out. I had done a lot of drugs as a young teenager in my 70s, and I'd never been high like this. I was seeing the kitchen for the first time. I never noticed the radiator was so rusty, or that it was crooked and out of level, or that there was a piece of loose linoleum underneath it, or that there was masking tape on my refrigerator handle. I was in this heightened state of awareness, and more importantly, and I say this to young people when I give these commencement talks, I always just talk about trying to live your true life. I just felt like Andre for the first time. And I was 22 years old, and I didn't know I hadn't been feeling like me, ever. And I've frankly been writing 5-6 days a week since that night just for that feeling. And it's been a lovely, happy accident to publish books and get to meet people like you. That's my story.
We're glad everything happened. We're glad the divine intervention occurred, for sure. A couple other things I want to talk about, and then I hope we can turn it over to questions.
Yeah, let's have a conversation with you guys.
Yeah. I just want to talk about one other thing, which is a couple other things. One of the things I always think when I read, well, Townie, definitely about your fiction, is your sentences are so beautiful. I said that to you back there. You write beautiful sentences. Not every writer does. I mean, you can write serviceable sentences and tell great stories and be a very good writer and write good books. But your sentences are so beautiful. And I saw in the New York Times, I thought this was kind of funny, the review of Dirty Love, they compared your sentences to waiters at the famous steakhouse Peter Luger's in Brooklyn.
Once a restaurant guy, always a restaurant guy.
They said, whoever wrote that review said, they know exactly what their job is, back to jobs, and they perform it with grace and pride. But I really liked that. At first I was like, no, it is not. They are not. His sentences are not the waiters at Peter Luger's, sir. But as I read on, I thought that was great. Are you the kind of writer who will spend hours crafting a sentence?
No, and in fact, I'm very relieved and pleased to hear you say that about sentences. You know, look, let's talk about my daddy. Because nobody wrote more beautiful sentences than my father, the late, great short story master, Andre Dubus. He was a prose stylist. His sentences were musical. You know, I actually heard him say once, he was telling, I was eavesdropping on a conversation he was having with another writer, and he said, yeah, back in Iowa City when I was a graduate student, my father said, he said, I came up with the perfect sentence, lyrical sentence with punctuation. And God, I wish I committed to memory what he said, but he said it was a semicolon, a hyphen, a comma, a period, and he had it all figured out. Wow. I said, oh, you're like one of those wicked geniuses. Wow. And the truth is, you know, for years I told myself that I wasn't that kind of writer, that my father was that kind of writer, and that I was the more serviceable sentence writer who was trying to just, you know, capture the images in my head.
Yeah.
And I don't work really, really hard on them as I'm writing. Here's my view. You know I've talked about this. I think that whether you're a male or female writer, that when you're writing, you are pregnant with your story the way a woman is pregnant with a real baby in her real womb. And your job is just to give blood to that baby in this dark, mysterious, nurturing, beautiful place. And to me, to work too hard on the sentences, well, okay, then let's just carry it further. And now you're giving birth to the baby. And I think to work too hard on the sentences as you go, it's like the baby's coming out, it's all covered, all that goop and stuff that you guys cover it with, and you're combing its hair. The first arm's out, you're trying to put a pink sweater on it, and you don't even know if it's got a vagina or a penis. So, to me,
I don't know where I've gone wrong.
to comb, you know, just have the baby, give it a bath, then start combing its hair, make the sentences beautiful later. So it's later I work really hard. You know, thank you. It's in the revision that I work really hard on the sentences, but I have to believe that they're true. So along the way, I cannot keep a sentence there if it's, it can't be bald-faced, ugly, wooden, and cliched, but if it's okay and it rings true, I'll make it prettier later.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. Yes, I think. I don't know if I should ask another question. You know?
Burping one's novel. That's what a book tour is. You're burping your novel. Or maybe changing its diaper.
All right, I'm going to ask the question that's on everyone's mind, which is, what are you working on next?
Aren't we all wondering? I can't tell you. I'm pregnant with it.
Come on. You haven't had the sonogram yet, or you're one of those?
Well, no. Do you talk about what you're working on? See,
But
why don't you talk about it?
But I'm the question asked because it deflates the idea.
Okay, I'm going to get really inappropriate now. Okay.
Uh-oh.
I believe I have never been able to talk about what I'm working on when I'm working on it because to me, well, take the pregnancy thing. It's like slitting the belly open and shining a light saying, I don't know if I like brown eyes. In fact, blue eyes are in now. You should really think about that. And also, oh, it's a boy? No, girls are in now. You get into the girl thing. As a matter of fact, twins would be better. Can you get a twin in there? Oh my God, it's going to not only kill the baby, it's going to, and not only kill the mother, it's going to kill the relationship the mother has for her future babies and future novels. I think you have to be very careful about when you allow criticism and even a comment into your dream process. Anything that I think takes you out of the dream. You know, I had a wonderful conversation with Richard Rousseau the other night. That sounds like a name dropping, but you know, we were on stage a couple nights ago, and Rick, are you in this room? He's here this weekend. Is he? There he is. Okay. Richard Rousseau is in the back, and also I see Wally Lamb back here too.
Oh yeah.
Hey guys. But Rick.
Oh, I see Rick. Yeah.
Rick, can I quote you the line about? Well, I'm going to quote you, so whether you like it or not.
You don't have a choice.
He said something really great about, someone asked about punctuation, the comma. Actually, Josh Bevel, who interviewed us up in Portland. And Ricky just said something so cool. He said, I don't worry about punctuation when I'm writing, and I recommend people don't. Just anything that's going to take you out of the dreamscape, you should just avoid. And thinking too much about commas is actually prematurely anticipating the audience. So don't worry about it. Just get it out, get it out, get it out. Is that, am I quoting you fairly accurately? Sure. Okay. Anyway, I thought that was wicked smart.
No, it's true, and I also think that to talk about what you're working on, to describe it, forces you to describe it.
Yes, okay, now this is the inappropriate thing I was going to say.
Okay.
And by forcing you to describe it, you are discharging some of that dramatic, some of that tension that the untold story gives the storyteller. You know, when something really horrible happens at work and you rush home because you want to tell your spouse about this horrible thing, you can't wait, right? Well, that same feeling, you must keep it inside if you're going to be writing every day for 4 years, right? To me, and this is the inappropriate part, it's like masturbating before you make love. Why would you do that? Keep the tension.
Right. Okay, I got it. I'm going to keep the tension.
So when I will say one thing about what I'm working on. I think it's a novel. My publisher is hoping that's the case.
We have the same publisher.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. They like the novels.
But I will tell you this, because it might be helpful to a writer in the room here, is I don't want to be writing what I'm writing. Flaubert is the one who said it the best. He said that the writer is not the one to choose his or her subject. The subject chooses the writer. I stumbled across this while I was working on a screenplay. And all I'll tell you is, my God, it's like, I don't know, having your ex-convict heroin addict uncle show up to live with you because you're the only family he's got. And so you got to let him in. And so I'm working on something.
So you're having some fun.
Oh, yes. Fun. It's called insomnia. But I do want to say this. I have learned over the years, and I want your opinion on this, Ann. I have learned over the years you must allow what comes to come. And you got to go through some psychic hurdles to do that.
Yeah.
You agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we should ask the audience if they have any questions before we have to leave this wonderful place. Thank you, Andre, for talking to me, baby.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm a little worried to say something about dreaming after all these conversations about lawmaking and all the rest of it, but I think that Saul Bellow said he never had to rewrite anything that came to him at 3 in the morning. Have you had similar situations, either of you, where things have come to you in the middle of the night, and what do you do with it?
So he said that he never had to rewrite anything that came to him at 3 in the morning. So we're in this kind of dream state.
I rewrite everything. I don't have that blessing.
I don't either, but boy, God bless Saul Bellow. The only thing that comes to me at 3 in the morning is having to go to the bathroom and worrying about taxes.
That's been on my mind also, the taxes.
Paul Engel, who used to run the Ira Writers Workshop, had a great line about writing. He said, writing is rewriting what you've already rewritten.
Yeah.
And I just really subscribe to that. But hey, man, Saul Bellow can say whatever the hell he wants. God rest his soul.
Yeah.
By the way, I have to point out another writer friend who's in the audience because he's also written 2 of the most powerful memoirs I've ever read, and that's Richard Hoffman.
Oh, wait, where's Richard
Right
Hoffman?
here. He's sitting right here. Sorry, man. But I left his house. Funny. Your memoir I just read in the door. What's the title again?
Love and Fury.
And when's it coming out?
June 3rd.
Okay, Love and Fury by Richard Hoffman. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous, really brave memoir, too.
Oh, great to see you.
So these are all my peeps in, and they're all here.
I know. You know, this is like when I'm walking down the street with my husband in New York. He's like, oh, there goes Jessica Lange, and there goes Tony Bourdain, and I never see anybody. I just like walk. I don't know what I do. I just walk like this, I guess. So right in front of us is everybody I know, but thank heavens you're here.
Hi.
Hi, I've been stalking you for a couple of years now.
Excellent.
Oh, I recognize you. You didn't have to send the flowers.
And I'm a librarian, and you and Anne and Richard Russo, Wally Man, you all make my job so easy. I recommend your books.
Oh, thank you.
Times,
Thank you.
And I love.
Where are you a librarian?
In Saugus.
Saugus.
But I met you. You came when I was at the Vacancy Library in Maiden.
Oh, that was so cool, that little room.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. What's your first name?
Diane.
Hi, Diane.
Hi.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Continue the stalking. It's good.
Yes.
Yes.
I just finished an interesting book called A Tale for the Time Being, which I recommend to all of you. But it raised a lot of questions about the relationship between the reader and the writer. And so I wonder if an image of the reader in her pink bathrobe with her cereal in front of her and all of that stuff ever enters the dream world, or the reader is not there.
That was interesting in that book, and I enjoyed that book too quite a bit.
Is this a novel? I don't
It's a
know.
novel, yeah.
And I can't remember the author.
Oh,
I-
Zebby.
Oh, Zebby.
Ruth, yeah.
Oh, I like her.
Yeah. I don't ever think about the reader. That's terrible. I'm sorry. I love you all.
No, I bet you do in this way. Can I interrupt?
Yeah, please.
You know,
get me on it this way.
Hemingway had a great line. He said, writing is easy until you think of the reader. And I think you think of that universal reader trying to give that reader an experience.
Yeah, but not readers. Not like the reader.
Like you don't think about an actual human being.
Right.
Although now and then I bet your editor creeps in a little bit.
Well, yeah. I thought we were talking about human beings.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I love her. I'm kidding. I couldn't resist.
Hey, don't be social media.
I couldn't resist. I love her.
What happens here stays here.
Yeah, this is like Las Vegas. No, I love her.
It's gonna be all over Facebook.
Oh, I know. She's gonna kill me.
You are
she's
so
great.
screwed.
No, but it is true that the voice of your editor and your agent, my agent also has a lot of opinions, and their voices do sometimes intrude.
And then you really have to show them.
Yeah, then you really have to.
Okay, you
this
hear-
happened recently.
But you know, one of the greatest, so Tim O'Brien, right? The things they carried, Tim O'Brien, right? He, I've known him for years. I haven't seen him for years. I just saw him for the first time after 20 years at our conference we did in Florida. And so back when I saw him more often in the early 90s, he had just published In the Lake of the Woods, which is a really difficult and beautiful novel. It's the only postmodern novel I can stomach, frankly, but because he pulls it off. But he quickly wrote an inscription in the book before he jumped in his cab, and all it said was, and I think this has to do with the reader, Andre, I hope this reaches inside. Tim. Are you kidding me? I'm running after the cab. That's all I'm trying to do! That's it! Holy shit, that's it! But isn't that it?
Yeah.
You just want this to go inside them, but
Yeah.
I never think about what it's going to actually do to the poor people. Somebody, with this new book, Dirty Love, a few people have asked, do you ever think about how we're going to feel? I said, no, I never do. Just wanted to do something to you.
I did this talk at Cape Cod, and this during the Q&A, this ancient woman stood up and said, oh, honey, you have a terrible life. And I said, no, I have a nice life. She said, no, you don't. You don't. Your life is terrible, and it's so sad. And I said, no, I'm happy. I'm a happy person. She said, no, you're not. And she said, I want you to stop writing sad books. Now, what's your new book called? And I said, The Obituary. Yes.
The first book of yours, Andre, that I read was the House of Sand and Fog, which it was a really difficult book for me to read because it was like you could feel the tension of this train wreck.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any temptation or to have it change track somehow? Or what
Yeah,
was it
boy.
like writing that? I couldn't go see the movie after reading the book.
I couldn't either. I haven't read the book. What's your first name?
Yvonne.
Yvonne. So did you,
We go to the
Yvonne?
same hairdresser.
What's that?
We go to the same hair person.
Thank you. I haven't been there in a while. I need a trim, Yvonne.
You have similar hairstyles, actually.
Yvonne was asking about well, the novel that put me on a little map, thank God for Oprah Winfrey and everybody, but called House, Sand and Fog, and she said, so there's a lot of dramatic tension in that, like a slow motion train wreck, and so your question was, how was I tempted to,
I mean, yeah,
to make it less of a wreck?
Writing it and staying in the train wreck.
You know what the weirdest thing is? I wrote that novel during the happiest years of my life. Because when I started that, this is how long novels take, when I started that novel, my wife was pregnant with our first child, and when I finished, we had 3 kids. And I really feel as if my life began after I became a father, and they've been the happiest years of my life in every way, and a husband, frankly, and my lovely wife, where are you? There's my beautiful wife, she's right here too.
Oh yeah, right in front of you.
Yes. Extra day theater. So no, so without giving away for people who have maybe not have read it, when the boy gets involved and now is in danger, I actually couldn't write for 3 weeks. In fact, I began to keep the manuscript in the basement because I didn't want them in the same apartment where we live with our beautiful babies. And I actually tried to I keep preaching to, I preach at these classes, you got to let the characters go where they're going to go. And I thought, yeah, screw that, I'm God. I'm the author. We're going to make this a little more hopeful. Oh, why can't I write a book like The Color Purple? She's gay and happy at the end in a purple flower field. I'm going to change it. And I tried to actually change it. And for years I've been talking about writing, and I think there's a difference between making it up on one hand and imagining it on the other. And I was beginning to make it up instead of imagining it. And it was as if I just run over a dog and he was crawling under the house to die. And I could feel the novel dying. And I had to just suck it up and let it go where it was really going to go with these 3 characters in their whatever world they were in. And where it went, I stand by creatively, but on a human side, I detest the book. And whenever I think it ends the way it has to end for those people. That's a perfect storm of characters. But whenever I meet someone who's read it for the first time, I want to apologize and hug them and buy them aromatherapy.
I like the aromatherapy.
Whatever the hell that is.
Yes, sir.
I have a question with regard to ending your books. Do you feel the need to answer all the readers' questions, or can you let a lot of questions hang in the air?
I don't feel I the need to answer the reader's questions. I feel the character's story has to end. You know, that's different to me.
But is that the same as but the character does not end. Because in your work, your characters are so alive, as is the case with Richard Rousseau's and Wally Lamb's, that they continue to live. You know, I was talking about Judith Krantz the other night, or maybe today, it's a blur, but you know, she made a lot of money writing these.
Princess Daisy, I love that book.
Did you?
Oh my
Okay,
goodness.
well, you know,
Yes.
truth is, ignorant me, I haven't read her, but I remember in the 80s she had said, and I hated her because she wrote bestsellers, and I just read this quote, that bestsellerdom is the gilded tomb of a mediocre talent.
Oh.
And I thought, you damn right. Then I had a few bestsellers. I thought, well, maybe it's not always. But she said, you know, I imagine that after my novels, my characters have one big cast party. So what are you talking about cast party? What are they, in a play? Are they pretending to have lives? Don't they keep living their lives? So my thoughts is, I feel no desire or need to wrap up anything. But there must, I think, be a resolution, at least in a musical sense. And I'm not a musician, but it seems to me that, you know, I love classical music and I'm totally ignorant of it. But, you know, the great symphonies seem to have a resolution. It's not tied up, there's no closure, a word I detest. But there's a sense that every instrument that's been activated has some echo resonance in the end. And you feel you've had a whole experience, but it's going to continue on without you. And that's the only kind of resolution I feel I need to do. And my hope is, you know, I have a lot of people say, your Indians frustrate the hell out of me. I don't feel like Indians. I say, good. But I'm not saying that maybe I need to work harder on that, but I don't want to.
and I'm not going to. Sarah, yeah.
Question in two parts. Regarding the method by which you're writing and opposed to making it up and imagining it, do you think that applies not just to realistic fiction, but also to genres like fantasy or science fiction?
Well, first, Peter, good to see you, brother. Peter is one of my graduates from UMass Lowell, and he's a very gifted graphic novelist, and now that's why you're asking.
Also, 4 semesters. This is a very brave man, by the way.
Peter, I really don't know. You know, again, throughout what I say, it's hard for me to imagine. No, I don't know. Graphic novels, I have no association with. I have no connection to. You know, I've read a couple that I admire, and you're good at it. It seems to me that, well, I don't know. I'm going to contradict myself. One of my cousins is James Lee Burke, the crime writer. He was my father's first cousin. And and his novels are so plot intricate. So you would think he really maps it out. Elmore Leonard, you would think the same. They wrote one sentence to the next.
Yeah.
So, you know, what do I know? What do I know, Peter? But I think that, yes, I think even if graphic novel is your natural, organic expression, just go one panel at a time and see where it goes. I think what keeps people from writing this way is, and I think this distinguishes decent writing from good writing from maybe great writing, is the power to revise. You know, because, and let me tell you, let me go a little deeper into this if I can. My beautiful wife, Fontaine, is not just a gifted dancer and choreographer, but she's also a really good painter. And when we were first married, she did this beautiful self-portrait, nude self-portrait of her sideways with pastels. And I loved it. No, her face didn't look exactly like her face. I didn't care. She captured something spiritual about her essence, and I adored this work. I went off to do a conference. I came back. She'd taken it off the wall and ruined it. And I still want it back, but it's gone. She totally ruined it. Because, I'm not trying to make her look bad, you can, sorry honey, but you can permanently ruin a painting. But you cannot permanently ruin a work of art, work of writing. You can always go back to what you had if what you discover in the revision doesn't work. But here's, Ann, and I want your opinion, here's why, Peter, I think a lot of writers don't go that extra mile in revision. It's because what they don't want to mess with is not the actual 14-page short story that they feel they might have to tear the bearing walls out of. They don't want to mess with the feeling they have about it. Because for the first time in about 3 years, they feel like they might actually be writing well. And this is a beautiful thing, and I'm not very good at this anyway, and if I ruin this, I'm going to ruin how I feel about my ability to write the next thing, and that's what people are really afraid to mess with, and I think you must be afraid to mess with it.
Mhm.
It's really...
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You agree?
Absolutely. And this is not in response to your question, but my brain works this way. I had dinner with Olive Fair last night. She says hi.
Oh, nice.
That's his
Olive Fair Burr.
Yeah.
My cousin.
And I was going to say that back there, but you brought up her father.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
I have a question about this whole business of writing and revising and working with your editor. And now that you've had Andre a number of books and novellas and so forth, maybe you can tell us how you worked with your editor. How much do you write before you show it to your editor? Is it many more chapters now than you used to? You do a lot more revision?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you asked
That's
about...
a great question.
What's your first name?
Pam.
Hi, Pam. It's a great question because one of the sadnesses I have from my friends who, because of the internet and ebooks and all that, who jump to self-publishing, is they're doing it too soon. Because I really want them to exhaust the traditional publishing route. You know, my first book went to 39 publishers over 7 years. My second book went to 29 publishers over 4 years. My third book went to 24 publishers over 3 years. You know, people think it's easier being Andre Dubus II. I think it was harder. And you know, I don't blame them. I love Ernest Hemingway. Who the hell's Ernest Hemingway III? Get out of here. You know? Right? Screw you. Why don't you go buy a car dealership? I got my Ernest Hemingway. And believe me, I've been told that. I would sell trucks. Anyway. Pam, because I mourn my writer friends who do that, even if they make $1 million selling ebooks, which is really hard to do because there's no publicity arm for it, they don't have an editor. They don't get an editor. And I know that my editor at Norton, with whom I've worked for 4 books in a row, Elaine Saliano Mason, who I think is going to be known as a great editor because just about every writer I've met who worked with, she's got like 6 National Book Award wins and 7 Pulitzer Prize wins from writers who no one had heard of. She is, so here's what happens. I will not give her anything or show her anything until I've written the whole thing. So you know, if there's a deadline on that, well, Rick Rousseau and I were talking about this. I said, hey, when's your deadline for your new novel? He says, I don't know, I didn't look. Right? I haven't looked at mine either. Why add to the 3 in the morning stress? But so I will not show it to her until I'm done. So I'm gonna make it as good as I possibly can, and pray that it's actually done. And all she's gonna say is, "May I touch your holy robe?" But she won't. And thank God, because I am convinced that the 4 books I've worked with her, if they were, they're 25% better than they would have been.
Now, does your...
How did the publisher choose her or anybody else?
I don't know how that works. Do you?
I have not a clue.
I'm so
glad
glad
they do it,
I'm
but
glad I
I have
found
not
her.
a clue. But does your agent give you feedback?
No, thank God.
No. My agent does.
Really?
Oh yeah, she won't, she doesn't want me to send directly to the editor, ever.
Oh, so she's like a filter. Well, for years my agent would say, Andre, maybe you should show it to me, and I can maybe make it more commercial.
Oh, really? Oh.
And I would say, Philip, am I a frigging whore and a prostitute? Because I don't care if it's commercial. I'm trying to create art. Are you shitting me? No.
I like a whore and a prostitute.
Yeah. I have more respect for the prostitute
What
than
did
the whore.
I say about your sentence?
Yes, they're repetitive. Forgive me.
Yes, in the back.
You mentioned that you were going to ask Anne about her flight attendant.
Oh, geez.
Yes, and do tell.
I worked for TWA for 8 years. Yeah, the late, great TWA. I know I'm old because everything I did, every job I had, every bookstore I went, they're all gone now. So that's why I know I'm old. I did for 8 years, right out of college, and wrote my first novel while I was a flight attendant. And you know, it provided a paycheck, which I haven't had since actually, so that was kind of nice. But I used to sit, I flew mostly international, and I would sit with my notebook, not even open, just in case, you know, inspiration hit, and just listen to people talk. you know, and, you know, international flights, they're up all night. And the things people would say to strangers in the dark. Well, that was later, after the plane landed. No, what they would talk about was really, I used to just, sometimes I would sit and cry because they couldn't really see each other's faces. They had randomly been seated next to each other, and they would tell their deepest secrets. It was unbelievable. And I really feel like I learned a lot about people. I was very young when I started as a flight attendant when I was 21. And I knew nothing about anything. You know, I was like the biggest, most naive bumpkin ever to land in TWA, let me tell you. And I learned so much about people and what they do and what they tell and how they open their hearts and what breaks their hearts and how they talk about it. That I really think that that experience helped my fiction, my writing, helped me as a person. Yeah.
Nice. Who knew? Yes, Vicki Hendrickson,
Yes, well,
the mother of our gathering.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to let you know we have 5 minutes more. That's what I wanted to be sure everybody knew.
Okay.
And then, wait, I'm not quite done. Then we will have a book signing, so Anne and Andre will go out to the lobby and you can go and buy books and get them signed then. And then you can come to the dinner at the Nicholson Hall, and if you haven't bought a ticket, it's all right, we're ready for you. Just come on now. Now I'm going to excuse myself.
Okay, I just have to say something about Vicki Hendrickson. I'm sure everybody, maybe, well, I'm sure not everyone in this room knows this. Vicki Hendrickson, about 10 years ago, read a National Endowment of the Arts study that showed that college-educated adult Americans were reading less and less and less literary fiction. And so she started this literary festival, and she has pioneered it the whole. And she's from Memphis, and I call her MH, short for Memphis Hurricane. Have we taken enough of your time? You want one more?
One more, and we have time for one more question. Yes?
Hi.
Hi.
I have 2 questions, and they're very different from each other, so I can't figure out which one I want to ask first. But this may be a naive question, but what is the difference between talking about your story idea and then reading what you're working on?
You mean out loud?
Yeah,
Sharing it?
like to other people in a group, you know?
I would never do that. I don't read it out loud to anyone.
But you know, John Irving can do it. Doesn't hurt him. I mean, I know a lot of writers who, really good writers who will write during the day and at night read those pages to their husband, spouse, or partner, and it works for them. So, you know.
Do you think that's okay?
I think whatever works for you is okay. There's no one way to do it, thank God. I'm just a superstitious little Virgo.
And you know, oh, you're a Virgo?
Pain in the ass.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I think my Capricorns overwhelm the pain in the ass Virgo-ness. Sorry.
Actually, you know, at writers' conferences, we're asked to give a reading. And I'm always stunned and impressed when someone reads from something they're working on. I could never do that. I have never...
So you have that same feeling that it's supposed to stay private.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have never taken pages even that I've revised and think are in good shape and stood in front of an audience and read. It's terrifying.
And you know what too though?
It's funny.
But it's potentially really demoralizing, right? So you've got to feel that what you're working on is kind of special and maybe working, and you're never going to get the reaction you want. I saw a really cool interview with Norman Mailer. Now, I'm just dating myself. On the Dick Cavett show. And Cavett is interviewing Norman Mailer, and Mailer's at the height of his fame, and he's in his 50s, and and Cavett's saying, "Mr. Mailer, what do you think of Doctorow's latest?" He said, "I haven't read it." "Well, what do you think of Gore Vidal's latest?" "No, I haven't read it." "What about Yuko Mishima's?" "No, I haven't read it." "Mr. Mailer, I don't want to embarrass you on national television, but do you read fiction?" He said, "Yeah, but not when I'm writing my own. So if I'm writing a novel," he said, here's what happens. He said, if I'm working on my novel It's like I'm working in my garage, and I am surrounded by 1,500 oily car parts. And then I read a novel by one of my peers that's really good. And it's like looking out at the road and seeing a shiny red convertible drive by with the driver waving, and I'm just demoralized.
I love that.
And that's how I feel.
Yeah.
I did, at Fontaine, I don't know if my wife remembers this, but I did read, it took 4 years to write House of Sand and Fog, and I think one night I read her 2 pages. It was the voice of the Colonel, who was an Iranian man, and I felt like I finally captured it. And, you know, I think I had a couple of beers, and I was feeling the passion romance of the artistic life, and I had just seen one of her dance shows, and I said, I'm going to share some of my art with my beautiful lover. And I read it to her, and all I wanted was, oh my God. but you know, all I got was, oh, that's good. Oh, well, no, but what's wrong with it? And there's nothing wrong with that. It was just 2 pages. But I think you have to, so you have to protect your process.
But you had a second part to the question. Of course.
So what do you think of the Moth Story Hour and like poetry slams and story slams, things like that?
Those are great.
Yeah, I like all of that. I love the Moth.
But it's oral storytelling for the most
That's
part, right? I mean, which is a whole different art form, and it's a beautiful thing. I love it. I can't turn off the radio when it's on.
Yeah.
You know?
Karen.
By the way, I don't want to publicly make it sound like my wife just goes on to everything I write. No one is a bigger supporter of my work than my wife. I just want to publicly, I need to say she's very good.
Karen, you have a question. There's Karen and Cap. Do you see that?
K and K.
The K's are here. Yay!
So it's always really fun watching you guys talk. And the other night I had the pleasure of listening to you and Richard Russo before that. And when you were just saying to Anne how after you read Comfort, which incredible book, it kind of, you know, made you feel like, well, maybe I can do this time here. One of the things that Richard Russo said the other night was about his beautiful memoir elsewhere that he didn't know if he was going to have the courage to be able to tell it, and then he read County, and he read that beautiful passage, and he thought, like, holy shit, if Andre can do this, maybe I can do it too. So, you know, we talk a lot about the relationship between readers and writers, but how about the relationship between writers and how your friendships maybe affect one another or help you find courage and stuff like that?
You said that so beautifully. I wouldn't even say anything more.
Let me just say that this is Karen Kinney, and I worked with her at the Eckerd Writers in Paradise conference down in St. Petersburg last winter, and she's working on a beautiful memoir herself, by the way, set in Lawrence. Well, look, you know what? I didn't really, even though I grew up with a writer father, I grew up more in blue-collar neighborhoods, and all my friends were blue-collar people, and I did blue-collar jobs until I started teaching writing at the college level. And you know, I have to say, and I've never said this out loud because I don't think I've thought it out loud, even quietly to myself. I think one of the greatest things that has happened to me in my writing life wasn't just the readership I got with the success of House of Sand and Fog in 1999 and how it's ensured that the following books have had a readership. And I've made some money, and some wonderful things have happened. But you know what? I went and met Wally Lamb, or Rick Rousseau, or Ann Hood, or you know, all these lovely people, because you know, we get invited to do things together, and then writers go out drinking a lot, and sometimes we're not, but sometimes they are, and we're always talking about what we talk about more than even most of us don't talk about what we're working on specifically, but we sure as hell talk about each other's books and the books we're reading.
Yeah.
And there's that great line from Henry James who said, you know, that a writer is a reader who is moved to emulation. And, you know, it's a beautiful thing. It's all. You guys, thank you all very much.